I'm sorry, I'll have a hand. What are you doing here tonight? glad you're welcome to my house, so to speak. Hello. Well, it keeps me awake.
At 7 o'clock, I'm going to call this meeting of Sandwich Council to order on Monday, July 15th. First item on the agenda is the adoption of the minutes. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This first item is the adoption of the minutes of the special council meeting of June 22nd, and the council committee minutes of July 6th.
Move for adoption as circulated.
Second.
Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. So next item on the agenda is our public input. If you'd like to speak to items C and D, the zoning bylaw amendment, and or the support for cooperative housing, you've got an opportunity now to come forward to the microphone. If you can state your name and your address, and you'll have 5 minutes to speak. We'd love to have you come forward and to hear from you. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak on those two items? Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Councillors, staff, Ken Whitcroft, 1044 Inverness Road. I would like to speak to C. Basically, I started coming here 15 years ago, watching council and learning what council was doing, watching developments come forward, watching things go forward. And one thing I find about this application is what I saw and many times before from other developers. The one that really comes to mind is the Cloverdale Inverness, which is let the houses run down until basically the neighbors will take anything that comes along. And my interpretation is this is the same thing with the cows. It's annoy the neighbors so much that they'll allow whatever takes place. The other aspect to this is, why are we giving away agricultural land in today's times? Right now for this region, we only produce 2% of the food for the people. That's not a sustainable number. And yet you're going to give away agricultural land to house more people. And again, this development, where is it? Down this road? This is car-oriented development. Greenhouse gas emissions. You're not reducing carbon, you're increasing it. You're also increasing more road congestion because people will be more cars on the road from this. It's up to you guys, and you're going to direct us, but those that will suffer in the long run will be those future generations after we're all dead and gone. We need to save the agricultural land today, preserve it, because right now we do not produce enough food for the people that live here, and that is no good. Those are my comments. Thank you. Thank you. Are there any other members of the public that wish to speak? Please come forward.
Hi, I'm Patty Shaw. I was here last week and speaking about co-op housing, and I'll just say a few words tonight.
Hi Patty, welcome back.
And thanks for having me here again, to all council and Honourable Mayor. Co-op housing is getting a lot of attention in the last few days, and I'm happy to hear that in the media. We are looking, and CHFBC, which is Co-op Housing Federation of British Columbia, of which I'm president, it's a volunteer position. We're working with various levels of government and individuals to gain support in replacing the subsidies for low-income co-op members, and that's the resolution that's mentioned on the agenda. And that's because at the end, co-ops were all created roughly about 25-30 years ago. And when they were created under the federal programs, they were given money to top up low-income people's rent. And that's ending with the operating agreements that are all ending, and it peaks out in 2017, and the last of them will be in 2020. There's some co-ops here in Victoria that have also already experienced their operating agreement ending and losing their subsidy. So that's why I'm here. I'm speaking up for those members, that vulnerable segment of society that includes seniors, people with disabilities, new Canadians, and single parents largely. I'm speaking up for them and asking the provincial government to step up to the plate and replace that subsidy. The federal government has made it very clear that they're not going to be supplying or creating a new program to replace those subsidies. So what we're asking is that they take the money that they have, they're saving on federal subsidies for co-op members, and give it to the province. The province will either match or, I'm not sure how they'll split that money, but the province then can administer it here in British Columbia as well as other provinces across Canada, because this is a national issue. There are 2,200 housing co-ops in Canada with almost 91,000 units. So we're talking about a lot of people, a lot of families. That's just units, that's not including actual family members that are in these homes. There's 264 nonprofit housing co-ops in BC with 14,500 units. So these are not small numbers. And in Saanich, there's 34 co-ops with 1,172 units. So that's 1,172 families, and which roughly about 35% are on subsidy. And they're the ones that are going to be met with rent increases, multiple hundreds of dollars, because the mandate with co-op housing is non-profit, so that the rent, or we call it housing charge, is below market, roughly about often 15% or more. So they're going to be facing, and the people that are subsidized, there's a calculation usually anywhere from, depending on the co-op, because they're all independently run and operated, and they have to, it's a business, so you need to meet your expenses. Roughly about 25% of income to anywhere up to about 36%. Unfortunately, some are as high, but most are right around 30% or high 20s. So those people that are on subsidy that are currently paying 28% of their income, roughly, I speak for my own co-op, are going to be facing full housing charges. So it could be $500, $600, $700, $800 more a month than what they're paying now. The statistics are 58% are women, 50% are single parent, 20% are new Canadians, 12% are people with disabilities, and about 35% of all housing co-op members are on subsidy. But not all people are. There are a lot of people that are mid-range income, low to mid. So it's a balance, a healthy community with a balance of people from diverse economic backgrounds as well as cultural backgrounds. So the actual, I think, do you want me to speak to the resolution right now itself, or leave that until council will deal with that directly?
It's your 5 minutes, you can do whatever you like.
Okay, sure. I don't get that often.
It's a new era.
So again, what we're asking for is that the federal government not be let off the hook. We're asking the federal government to reinvest the money that it saves when these agreements end, when they expire, by transferring enough money to the provinces to pick up the slack. And we're asking for the municipality of Saanich, as well as other municipalities and organizations across Canada and British Columbia and Canada, to adopt this resolution, to raise awareness, and to work with all levels of government to ask the provincial government, Rich Coleman specifically, ask him to replace these subsidies now and not later, when these people have already been put out of their units, essentially, to try to find something that they can afford, which we know in this market, particularly in Greater Victoria, is one of the highest priced housing markets in the country. And so they'll be faced with scrambling and trying to find a place if they can. And we're all working against homelessness. We're working in the wrong direction if we let these subsidies slide and we let these low-income people become victim to one of the worst housing crises in Canada. I don't know, I think that's it for now. I urge you and request your support. And if you have any questions, please ask.
Great, thank you. Are there any of the members of the public that wish to speak?
I have a question.
I see your hand up, but I'm going to allow this public to continue in the public input section, and then we'll get to this item on D in the agenda. Councillor Dermott.
Who is a member of the public?
I think I'm going to let the members of the public come up and speak as it's their time.
I don't think that's consistent with our procedures bylaw, Mr. Mayor.
This isn't delegation, this is public input.
Correct.
Yeah.
And can council ask question of the public?
Carrie, could you inform us?
Mr. Mayor, I'm not aware of anything in the procedure bylaw that would disallow a member of council to ask a question of a member of the public. Through you, Mr. Mayor, but I'm not aware of anything in the procedure bylaw that would disallow that. I'll certainly look over at my colleague, and she's nodding her head.
So it's up to the chair to allow?
Through the chair, I think that it's really a decision of council. If there's nothing in the procedure bylaw that would stop a member of council from having the ability to ask a question of the member of public, it really becomes a decision of council as opposed to the chair having that authority.
Okay, so given the ambiguity, I was interested in moving the council meeting along. We can get to item D, but I'll entertain Director Durham's question then.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. I just wondered if you could clarify something for me. I did some research in terms of the co-op housing, which I think is a really good program. Some of the things that were indicated to me was that the time when the federal program comes to an end coincides with the end of the mortgage on the building.
Yes.
Wouldn't that result in a reduction in rents when somebody no longer has to pay the mortgage?
Yes, you would hope so, and it sounds like that on paper, but what housing co-ops are non-profits, and they're mandated by the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation to operate with a zero balanced budget. So, and because a lot of these co-ops, many reasons, the co-ops were built as purpose-built co-ops, so they were built with low, often poor construction and poor materials. And so here we are, 35 years later, we have massive renovations that are needed. We haven't been able to raise our rent enough to create a revenue where we could save enough money for roofs, siding, windows. So most co-ops at this point are needing massive renovations, and they'll have to second mortgage right away to maintain their asset. There's catastrophic building failure, or building envelope failure in many co-ops as well. There's one down on Dockside Green, Tyee, that's suffering from massive mold and leakage problems. Our co-op too, balconies weren't built to code, not today's code, so we're having to redo them all. So in order to save that money, we would have had to have rent that was market or higher than market, defeating the purpose of co-ops. So to keep our rent below market rent, even slightly, even 10 to 15%, we haven't been able to accumulate the funds necessary to renovate our homes and make them sustainable so they'll be there for families in the future. So we don't have the money to replace, on top of do all the renovations, also replace the subsidy, or create a subsidy for our members, our low-income members.
Thank you very much.
Was there another hand up? Councilor Orban.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mayor. I guess I'd just like to make the comment, there's a big difference in my mind between asking a question of the applicant, but the speaker, and council sharing all the wisdom they have on the subject. And I think if we can keep it very specific, I think it'll help move the process along. So I do support what we're doing. Thanks.
Me too, thank you for that. Any other questions from council?
Okay, thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Are there any of the members of the public who wish to speak? Calling for a second time, any of the members of the public who wish to speak? Two items are zoning bylaw amendment 1516 Mount Douglas Cross Road and support for cooperative housing. Calling for a third time, any members of the public who wish to speak? All right, seeing none, we'll call an end to the public input period and we'll move on to our section C in the agenda, bylaws. Number 1, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This next item is the support for cooperative housing. The report, I'm sorry, I'm one step ahead of myself here.
Zoning bylaw.
Yes, thank you. This is the first reading, actually, of zoning amendment bylaw 9343. This will rezone the property at 1516 Mount Dive Crossroad to the zone R10 for proposed subdivision 14 Lafayette Strata and 2 fee simple. I will note that this item is scheduled for public hearing on July 21st, and this is on its way out.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Haynes, seconded by Councillor Berglund. Any discussion on this? Seeing none, I'll call a question on the first reading. All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you so much. Next item, please, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Now I can go on to item D. This is the support for cooperative housing. The report from Councillor Haynes is recommending that Council endorse a resolution to write to governments of Canada and British Columbia, requesting that they work both jointly and separately on mechanisms to maintain a rent supplement program, as well as that we call upon the federal government to commit to reinvest the savings from expiring federal housing agreements. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'd like to move that report and recommendation if there's a second. That's good, thank you. We're moving along here. I'll speak to it. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time. And the report largely speaks for itself. But whilst I understand the resolution that Ms. Shaw has brought forward, I didn't embrace all of her resolutions on feedback. I gave more latitude on how it's interpreted, but at the same time gave us the ability to talk to the need for our federal and provincial governments to ensure that there are mechanisms to support rent supplements. And also that if the federal government is able to cease supplements, it would then take those supplements and reinvest them in the way that you heard today, where these 7 mortgages are needed. Maybe there's a room there for government aid in that space. But I'm not prescriptive in this. I'm just raising the topic and raising our voice. And I'd like to mention this. In the last week, we've seen quite a bit of attention on this. I have met with several MLAs and MPs and MP candidates, and I do see that the voice of Saanich is being heard at the provincial and the federal level. And just today, I got a note from one of the Liberal candidates in the federal election, Tim Kaine, where they're specifically talking about the hard work we're all doing here in Saanich to raise the conversation around affordable housing. I did appreciate feedback from my colleagues on how I spoke to the issue of the CRD chair and the work of the CRD going forward to UBCM. And I had an interesting exchange today with our chair, who currently is cycling in the Czech Republic. And he understands what we're doing and has no problem with the way I've presented it to date. But there will be some clarification that's needed as that report comes forward. I think the report largely speaks to itself, and I welcome my colleagues' advice.
With their hand up next, Councillor Brownhoff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Haynes and I have been going back and forth on the weekend about some of the issues. What I raised when this came forward at the microphone was that the CRD has been involved around these cancellations or wrapping up of these subsidies for quite some time. And so I double-checked with CRD staff. So I just want to read some of the comments I got back. They said that the operating agreement set out the amount, duration, and conditions of the subsidy provided by the provincial and federal governments or both. Their expiry often is tied to the 35-year mortgage amortization period. Means when the mortgage expires, the nonprofit housing providers are responsible for the project's ongoing financial viability. The reasoning behind this is that following repayment of the mortgage, a project should be able to generate sufficient revenue to maintain its viability while continuing to provide affordable housing. So at the CRD level, just so everyone understands, from a regional housing perspective, affordability, not just co-ops, but the affordable housing. So in September, our CRD staff will be bringing forward to the Planning, Transportation, Protective Services Committee
a Capital Region Housing data book and gap analysis, which includes information regarding the expiring operating agreements. An update on the Regional Housing Affordability Strategy, which some of us know was built in 2007 and quite out of date. And it will, that will come forward in the fall as well, and it will include a focus on expiring operating agreements. So Councillor German sits on that committee, and Councillor Bryce and I sit on the Finance Committee, and we've been raising the issue around economic, energy efficiency of some of these buildings, because it might not just be a rent subsidy, it might be getting these buildings into a more energy efficient stage. And from the Capital Region Housing Corp, which Councillor Plant sits on, the upcoming strategic planning session with that board will focus on their service delivery in the face of expiring operating agreements. And there are 37 out of 42 of those properties. And federal and provincial operating agreements will be ending between 2019 and 2031. And the Regional Housing Service Plan, which is coming forward for 2016 to 2018, includes developing a sustainability strategy for expiring operating agreements. So I just, when they said data book, I didn't know data, we think of computers. So the data book is actually an in-depth analysis of income and housing demographics in the capital region. The gap analysis is part of the data book that examines the current housing stock against the current need, exposing the gaps. There is a section on social housing that includes the wait list, and the data book also includes regional and municipal statistics. So, and then the other thing they told me was the provincial government through BC Housing has produced this book called Expiring Operating Agreements, a Plan Guide for BC Nonprofit Housing Societies. And I found it very interesting. The first page says there are about 30 different operating agreements. So these operating agreements are standard, they're all different, and each has distinct requirements and restrictions. Over 15,000 units expire in 2025, and another 14,000 expire in 2033. 37% of the units are families and 51% are for seniors. And there's a big box down there that says the province of BC has committed to continuing to fund its share in federal and provincial cost-shared housing programs past the expiry of the operating agreements. Now I say all this because what I'd like Council to think about is referring this to the work being done at the CRD that will be coming forward in the fall. And all our colleagues that sit on various committees can raise this as part of the whole affordability housing in the region. Thank you.
Councillor Haynes?
So I appreciate my colleague bringing that forward. And I think there's room here to do both, because there's no harm in Saanich also raising its voice. And I think one of the things we talked about over the weekend was this motion could be adjusted to be reflecting what you've just said, that we support the work that's being done at the CRD. But I think what I take from your long description there, and what maybe others in the room take, is that there's a lot of information there, and we do need to find out more. And I prepared a little thing here, and that maybe should be the theme we're returning to. As those different agreements expire, how many of them impact Saanich? Yeah, it will come out. And then in the fall, we're invited Ms. Shaw to come to PTED and talk us through her knowledge from the co-op side on how it's impacting. So I'm fully in support of what you're saying, and I think we're very close on this motion, and it could easily be adjusted. I could adjust it myself, but I welcome you to make a friendly amendment to show how the work at Saanich would be supportive of the coming reports and work from the CRD.
If I could, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Bradlaugh?
I was just going to say, your recommendation, instead of writing all those letters now, I would recommend that this report and the resolution be referred to the CRD planning. Like I said, all these are coming forward in September. So they're well aware of it, and you will probably see specific things around Saanich co-ops and affordable housing. Saanich has the most affordable housing in the region, so.
We're going back and forth like it's a
We are
ping
going
pong.
back on.
Can I ask-
Can
can I-
I ask to go now?
Councillor Haynes, I haven't given you opportunity to speak.
Oh,
I just
sorry.
wanted, I was speaking. Thank you. I want to ask our clerk to just read back the original motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The recommendation is that council support the resolution and send letters to the Government of Canada, local MPs and the Premier, and to ministers responsible for housing, health and finance, and to our local MLAs outlining these concerns. And basically, it is that Saanich is urging the governments of Canada to work both, and the province, to work both jointly and separately on mechanisms to maintain a rent supplement program for more than 20,000 low-income members in housing co-ops, and that we call upon the federal government to commit now to reinvest the savings from expiring federal housing agreements to share the cost of funding this program.
Thank you for that. Councillor Haynes.
So, well, I understand what you're saying. We could wait till September, and September will actually be October. The election will be over. One of the aims here is to raise this during this current federal election, and the people I've spoken to think there's value in that. Tim Kaine, the Liberal candidate, has got a press release saying, yes, this is important. I met with